folks, let's go ahead and get started here. Again, appreciate everybody's joining us again today. Welcome. My name is David Sturz with Cooperative Strategies, K-12 Planning, and we know, as many of you know, this is a continuation of the past 2 months of work that we've been collaborating with the National Council on School Facilities, particularly with Mary Filardo, to look at reopening strategies across the country and trying to pull together what's the best guidance among the guidance that's out there, because there's a plethora. And so today what we're looking at is moving into our summer series where we're looking at doing interviews, taking deeper dives with individuals who are really points of contact and really decision makers, and taking just a deeper look in individual experiences, asking some questions to take a more contextualized look on the local ground there, as we've been the past 2 months looking globally across the country. We're going to take a pivot this summer, and we'll set out a schedule here in the next few days with registrations for the rest of the summer series with different folks around the country. We're going to be asking a series of some of the similar questions, and then of course some differential questions based upon their context and where folks are coming from. But this is a chance where we're just going to do an interview with folks, and we're honored, happy to have Dr. Julius Monk with us today from Durham Public Schools, Chief Operating Officer. And so we're just going to ask some questions about what he's been wrestling with, what resources he's been using, and just allow him to talk a little bit more in depth about the kind of planning that he's doing right now, challenges, knowns, unknowns, et cetera. And then use this as a time to really ask your questions to Dr. Monk here in the chat, and we'll have some time at the end for Q&A as we go through. So I'm going to share my screen here, and then we're going to get right into it. So I'll introduce Julius here briefly, and then allow him to introduce himself. So Julius Monk, the Chief Operating Officer of Durham Public, who lives in Durham, has kids in the district, serves as Executive Director of Facilities at Guilford County School District in North Carolina from 13 to 19. Was part of a team that went and testified on the Hill a couple years back, right? Was it a couple springs ago? About the condition and need for school facility investment nationwide. Bachelor of Science in Instruction Management at NC, Agriculture and State, Master's of Entrepreneurship at Western Carolina, and a doctorate in leadership from UC Greensboro. So a little bit about Durham, and then let Dr. Monk introduce himself. North Carolina population about 300,000, serves 32,000 students, give or take. About 30 elementary schools, 9 middles, K-8, 2 secondaries, and 11 high schools. So in your context, Julius, just if you could, just introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a little bit about kind of how you have been wrestling with these issues in the past few months, and just give us a chance to introduce yourself and just high level kind of what's your life been like the past few months.
All right. Well, thank you, David. I've been attending these webinars for the past few weeks, and I found them, if nothing else, therapeutic, because I know the people out here, wrestling with the same issues that we're wrestling with here in Durham. Over the past few months, it's been different. This is budget season for many of our school districts, and normally you're talking about the budget that you need for the upcoming school year to do normal things, normal capital.
Good, how are you?
Normal resources and things like that. And now, on top of that, we're faced with trying to calculate
of how much
PPE purchases. It's covering for our students and staff. How we're going to transport kids back and forth to school, which is already a complex endeavor as it is. And so it's really challenging to us as well, because normally we think about school as a place where everybody is, coming together, you're being close to one another. One of my favorite parts of school is the around the first day of school, first week of school, whenever you see the kids who are returning back, running up to see their teachers and giving them a big hug. And we know that school won't look like that this year. You know, you also will see lines and lines of cars from, you know, parents dropping off their little pre-K or kindergartner, and they want to walk them to class and help them put their books up for the first time. And we won't see that either this year. And so it's a very, you know, strange time for everyone. You mentioned I have kids of my own in the district. And so I look at it as I got 32,000 kids though, right? Because I want to make sure that my kids are safe and that other people's kids are safe as well. It's a heavy burden for on this call that are trusted with people's little ones. And so I just want to say to everyone out there, I appreciate your work that you're doing, and it's important.
I think it was I called maybe, and you were.
Yeah, and if folks wouldn't mind muting here as we're going through, appreciate that. And you know, as you have questions, would really encourage you as we get into some of the specific questions for Julius, if you could please just type those in the chat as it comes up, different considerations. And you know, I was remiss in the introductions in stating, those of you, and appreciate all of you who've been adding to this conversation for the past couple months. Just as a recap, the work that we've been doing and all of the guidance documents and considerations is being worked on right now to be put into a website and a report that breaks down all the different sections. And so for everything from the capacity to the hygiene to the budget elements and all that kind of stuff is being worked on. So as that website comes to fruition, you know, we'll give you that link and information, but Mary and her team are working really hard to get that to production. So just want to make a call out to that. So going forward, so Julius, you know, when you're looking at facts, like one of my mantras in any kind of planning situation is we all have to deal with the same set of facts. And yet in this circumstance, that just doesn't seem readily available. Where are you getting your data? How are you sifting the wheat from the chaff in the information that's out there?
Right. You're exactly right. I think it's getting a little bit better as places like the CDC and Health and Human Services and other organizations are getting a better grasp on how the virus responds and is transmitted. But at first it was tough, before they were saying, don't get masks. And, so we was encouraging people not go out and, put the mask on, and now everybody needs to have a face covering. Also challenging is that it's so different everywhere what the requirement's going to be. So even though, and it's not even amongst just the states, it's even within my own state, my own neighboring counties. In my county, so in my county, we actually had one of our students to pass away from COVID over the past week or so. Yeah. And we have a rise and a spike in our cases. And so what we do here in Durham is going to look different from what our neighboring Wake County is going to do, or, Chapel Hill, Carborough schools, or Orange County schools, because their caseload is different. Their health department is going to give them different guidance. And so I think that can be challenging for parents to understand. It's hard for us to communicate when things change as frequently as they do. And just imagine, that 13 years that you had up there, that I commuted back and forth from Durham to Greensboro. And so, and we have a large number of staff to do that. And I'm sure that others on this call probably have the same thing. And so if you can imagine, if the rules for me as a parent with children in Durham are different than the place that I'm going to work, that's going to cause some confusion, right? If I'm a teacher and the county that I live in differs from the county that I work, and I don't have childcare for my own children, how am I going to go and teach in the other county? So now there's a shortage of the workforce in different counties. And then the daycare situation is different. So this is where, you got to have those public and private entities walking in lockstep. If, we depend heavily on daycares, not only for care for our staff, but when, we have some year-round schools. And so when those schools aren't in, we depend on the daycares having capacity enough to take care of those students. And with their reduced capacity, that makes it, tougher on us. So, the resources that we use are some of what everyone else, you have the state resources, CDC, EPA, FDA, you name an acronym, we're looking at it. One of the most important, I would say, would be our families, right? And trying to, communicate to them and hear back from them what they feel is going to be important. So we put out a survey, trying to gauge whether virtual schools is an option for them, or if they're going to be heavily dependent on brick and mortar. And if they are going to come to our brick and mortar sites, so they're going to be dependent on bus transportation. I really feel like we could figure our way out through many operational circumstances as it relates to the campus. That transportation, like I said, it's a beast to begin with.
Yeah, it is.
And then we start social distancing and taking buses that could hold 72 kids down to 12 and the guidance that we receive from our state. That's, what used to be one route is now 5 routes. And when a kid's going to learn, it's a question that, I often ask when we're talking about these things.
Yeah. So you mentioned you're getting your data from all the acronyms, right?
Yeah.
So, and then the parents. So I remember a couple of weeks back, you mentioned you said you send the survey out. Do you have results coming in from that, or is that still being compiled?
We're still compiling it. I think we have another week or so that we're up there, and quite frankly, that's just until we formulate additional questions from what we receive. But it's not getting participation that we would like to see. I mean, it's getting close to summertime. A lot of people, our brains are automatically, tuned in when the end of year hits. You relax a little bit, out a little bit more. Our state has relaxed quite a bit on some of the stay-at-home orders that we issued, including our county. So you can hear kids at the pool splashing around and having a good time. And so it may not be on the top of people's minds, but as the economy picks back up and more people have to start to return to work, and you start moving closer to August, I do think it's going to be at the top of people's minds, and we got to be ready for it.
It doesn't give you much time to plan, though.
It doesn't. It really doesn't. And so you almost have to plan for the worst, right? That everybody has to come to school, and everybody's going to need to ride the bus, which puts us almost in an impossible situation.
Yeah, and kind of we'll get to some of those scenario considerations in a minute. So, data there, obviously, all of the known entities, and then surveys from parents coming in. We had a question on the chat here from Elika. If the copy of your survey, is that public, and could you share a copy of that, or could folks find that survey and see what kind of questions you're asking?
Absolutely, and I'll get that to you, David. Yeah.
Okay.
The link to it.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Coming in again on the chat is, and we'll send that out to the email. This time we'll send the email out more than 30 minutes ahead of the meeting time. Sorry, folks. What is your start date? Are you, I understand the governor is pushing for August 17 in North Carolina. Is that what you're planning on?
Yeah, so we have 3 start dates. Like I said, we have some year-round schools that we're going to continue with those. There's about 6 of them that are year-round. They'll actually start August the 3rd. Extended year, which are specialty schools, which will start August the 10th. and then our traditional schools will start August the 17th. And of course, we have middle colleges and early colleges that are going to align with our with the colleges that they're housed.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting wrinkle, the early college. So are you pretty much beholden to what the university's planning in terms of their capacity and schedule and so forth?
That's right.
Yeah, that would make sense. Another question came in, Julius, asking, do you anticipate your contracts of transportation school buses to change? Are you looking at adding more routes, more drivers, more buses, reductions? Kind of what's your current thinking in that respect?
So our state is broken up into 3 plans, depending on what the caseload is. Plan A is basically business as usual. So if you got 72 seats on a bus, you can fill them up. They're recommended you face coverings, things like that, right? And so there's we would do our normal routes for those. Plan B says that you have to maintain that 6 feet distance, reduces that all the way down to like 12 students on the bus. And so we did a scenario with one of our schools. It's about 830 students we're projected to have next year. And the scenario that we ran there, if the same amount of students that rode the bus in 2019 ride it in 2020, we would need to add 42 buses just for that. We can barely get drivers.
I dare say is not possible.
Right. Yeah. It's A, you don't have the actual buses, and then B, getting
nor the drivers
to do it. Yeah. Becomes very complicated. So we know that one of our strategies for that we're looking at now is reducing the school level that comes to school, meaning that high schoolers would likely do virtual learning. And we're doing a scenario where it is pre-K 8 and then basically pre-K 7-ish to see if that will help out with some of the transportation. Like I said, transportation is the absolute hardest thing to figure out as we move forward. That the A-Day, B-Day, which just really complicates transportation, trying to determine who's at the bus stop, who should be there, and then you bring them to school. I mean, it gets to be a little bit complex. And then you're doing, double work essentially for every A-Day route. You're going to have a B-Day route. It's not necessarily the same, right? So it's that transportation. It's the one thing that so if anybody on this call has got it cracked, please send me your contact information, because it's got us stumped right now.
Yeah, no, that is the rub for most folks talking about it, unless you're a walkable school, which I've talked to a couple lucky principals, and that's the case. But by and large, it's a tough nut to crack. So what you're essentially saying is like the school bus drivers, you're anticipating more or less constant, maybe even less, I would surmise. Yeah. I can certainly imagine. What I've heard is, particularly your bus drivers who are more at risk in different categories are saying, no thanks.
That's right.
Are you hearing that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, so in North Carolina, they had state emergency leave that was basically offered to classified employees. Of course, they had some criteria that that you had to meet to qualify for it. But as other operations people on this line could attest to, normally your older people that are at work are your bus drivers, are your bus monitors, they're your cafeteria workers, and your right. And so some of the guidance that we receive from the state is, if someone self-identifies as being at higher risk, then you got to figure out a way to accommodate them and things like that. But this just goes back, and I get it, because, when people think of schools, they're thinking about what happens in the school building, typically in the classroom, the teachers, the principals, maybe the front office workers. And so to a certain extent, you can accommodate some of that, right? If I'm a high-risk teacher, I can get a laptop, they can work from home. There's no accommodating the custodian or the bus driver or school nutrition person. So that's going to be
No.
challenging to be able to fill those positions if people do not return. And then if they do become ill, trying to pull from a sub pool, which is basically becomes our part-time employees because we dip into it so much.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of good questions coming up. You know, and I can, Elika with ASBO mentioned that there's a webinar that ASBO is doing, Association of School Business Officials, on Monday, specifically on transportation. So Elika, if you don't mind, there's a registration link you want to post in the chat to that. That would be, I think, very fruitful for many of us. Thank you. So a question from Kara: is anyone in the call working with municipal transportation authorities on busing children? I have heard of that in some cases, is where you're looking to partner with municipal transportation, which ironically, you know, heard on one of our calls, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, some municipalities have looser restrictions on loading than what we're having to do in schools, which is one of those ironies that will have to be worked out in time as the lawyers go to town on it. But and then the other questions are you planning to provide daycare on non-A or B days? If so, plan to transport. So a couple questions, and then are any priorities given to special ed students? So kind of three questions, and we'll move on to the next topic here. But sort of the big high level here is there any talk about partnering with municipal transportation? What's the thought for childcare options for kids who are off on their off days or off weeks, if it's an A day or A week or whatever? And is there any difference in consideration given to special needs students in terms of seat time?
Yeah, so one of the 50 task force that I'm on is with city and county. There's a smaller group of us that work together. And in my city, and so I'm a county school district, right? So I got an urban portion, but I also got some a rural school that's like way off the city. But we have had conversation of could the city buses add to the capacity? In the city and county that I live in, they have jointly come together and have part of their order is to reduce the number of passengers that they have on the bus system. And so we are limited there. The second part is, and those of you who work in these types of counties would know, it's not like in DC or Baltimore where the bus stop is like right there at the school near it. You would be some walking involved for our students to use the bus. But we do have some high school students in particular and some middle that would utilize public transportation, and they currently do. Okay. That is something that we would like to actually expand even once this is over, because that would help with our transportation needs.
Sure.
What was the second question?
And the question is, you know, is there any thoughts about childcare or options for kids who are on their off days? Is it just online instruction? Is it online plus daycare for kids of a certain age? Is it, I heard you say high school online and maybe a K-8 difference there. So kind of explain a little bit. We're jumping around in questions, but this is timely. So you're thinking basically that, you know, the high schoolers would be online purely 100%, and then the K-8 would be flipping days, that kind of thing?
Well, so what we would like to do is to put the high schools online at least for the first semester and see how, you know, they're shaking out. Use the high school capacity to provide seats for the middle schools and put a couple of schools, maybe 3 together at one high school. And then maybe do pre-K2 at the elementary site, and then 3-5 or 4-5 at the middle school sites, and put
the middle site.
Right. And our goal is to get, you know, students who would be, you know, 13 and under, so about grade 8 or grade 7 and to be on our campuses every single day in some form. Because childcare is going to be an issue with doing the A-Day, B-Day. And like I said, we depend heavily on, you know, the Ys, the churches, the other daycares to provide childcare we're not in school. But right now, their capacity is all
limited too.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
For our students with exceptionalities, yes, that's, we want to make sure that we have spaces that are suitable for their needs. They're our highest risk health-wise a lot of the times, and so we want to make sure that they'll be able to get a good education with us.
Wow, so interesting. So just to make sure I'm tracking with you, so you're saying that those elementary kids under 13, you're looking at a plan that could have them on campus every day.
Right. Yeah, that'll be our goal, to have them
okay.
Today. And so what that does is, so if you think of it this way, David is the teacher for 20 kids, but Julius is watching 10 of them while David is teaching the other 10, right? So I'm not the licensed teacher that's there. I'm maybe the media specialist or something like that.
Okay.
That are watching that group on a Monday, and then David comes on Tuesday and teaches the other, back and forth, things like that. Just so that we can get the kids on the campus and have some eyes on them.
Okay. All right. Interesting. And so how are you thinking about space capacity then, if you're having 1-2 adults in these rooms with the kids? Are you using a certain square foot per student? Are you using a maximum per room? Are you, spreading out into, across the building in non-traditional spaces? How are you making that work?
So we're actually using that social distancing classroom calculator thing that you all sent out. I think it was from Canon Design.
Okay. My buddy at Canon did that. Yeah. Yeah.
And so roughly, here's another thing I would bring up. This, some lessons to be learned from pandemics and other disasters. It would have been great if we had every one of our classroom square footages somewhere in a database that could apply something to, and then bloop, 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 I would know exactly what the capacity is. And so since we don't have that, and like many of you, we don't, our bandwidth is really short. We don't have a lot of people. It's all, in education, it's always do more with less. And you see when you like this can be hurtful to you. And so we're using some general assumptions, right? We're saying that typically the lower the grade level, the larger the class is. Classroom, the extra square footage. And so we're going to say that regardless, though, we're not going to consider anything less than 600, 650 square feet a classroom, right? Matter of fact, those resource rooms, things like that, we're going to use as our isolation areas if someone starts to sip.
So below 650 square feet, pretty much that's your isolation. That's smart, right? Too small to be a classroom anyway.
That's right. And so for grades pre-K to say 3 or 2 or whatever, we will limit it to about 10 kids per class and keep that square footage social distance, which is about 40-some, 50-some square feet per
right.
As you get a little bit older, we're gonna trust and believe that our students are gonna be a little bit more mature. They're not gonna be licking their hands and touching each other and things like that. And so that square footage is gonna get closer to the 6x6 area, maybe 15 in those classroom spaces, right? And just go off assumptions and do some pretty quick calculations to determine what our capacity is, utilizing though all the spaces in the district and not being hamstrung to, this is just an elementary, this is just a middle school. Of course, in North Carolina, we got to take into consideration pre-K 1, they have to be on the level where they can egress directly out to, a flat surface. So we can't put them on the 2 stories. So we got to take that kind of thing into consideration. But we believe from all that we see that we should have enough capacity if we add in our high school capacity into it and put some middle school students in there to make it work. But that's our goal. And if we can't get, pre-K 8, then we might have to break it down to pre-K 6 or, 7 or something like that too.
Sure. But insofar as you can, the youngest students up are going to be there full time as much as you can.
That's
From
right.
a building standpoint, you're pretty sure you can get them all in, which makes sense. Now your biggest limiting factor is, can you get them there?
That's right. Absolutely. Because it means nothing if you can't get them to school.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I would, as a capital planner by training, most of my life and working this, the capacity thing is spot on, man. If you're running a district and you don't know your capacities, get a laser pointer from Home Depot and just start going to town. Get your lengths width. It doesn't take that long, and it's hugely, hugely impactful for anything you do. So just a stamp _ bold italics on that one.
That's right.
So, yeah, quick question, and then we're going to get to the next one. So are you planning on any use of outdoor spaces, either supplementary or regularly scheduled?
You mean in play areas or like mobile classrooms?
Yeah, I think the question is, can we have classes outside? Like, for example, I talked to one principal in Jefferson County, Colorado last week, who was talking about having, insofar as they can, scheduling choir outside. Because if they don't do choir outside, they have to wear masks because of all of the respiration and the risks inherent therein. But if they're outside and 6 feet apart, there's enough ventilation and airflow that the load, is lower. Any considerations about regular use of, outdoor space for instructional purposes?
Yeah, so I think that every space on our campus is going to be up for grabs. North Carolina has a interesting climate here. You can have 30 degree swings in the same day, thunderstorms, all
right.
Crazy stuff. It's an interesting place, but yeah, I think that for now, things like band and choir, we don't even anticipate really. We haven't been focused on how we're going to do those things right now, because we basically reclaiming those space for actual core type classrooms. But I think it is a good idea if you could social distance outside and still have those classes like choir. Of course, PE is one that we would definitely use outside when the weather.
Sure.
And because we're going to need to get the kids out. Part of the strategy is to isolate the kids in quarters to make contact tracing and things like that a little bit easier. But you could imagine being stuck in the same classroom, breakfast, lunch, everything all day long in that same place, and then on a bus for an hour to get home.
I've seen how it works for my kids in my house, and I can't imagine multiplying that by 400 right. and putting it in one building. It's not going to work.
Absolutely. So you got to get them outside and get that fresh air.
Right. Yeah, I think, sort of 2 cents on that one is that's something everybody kind of knows, but your immediate concerns, hierarchy of needs is, can I get the kids there, and what do I do when they're there? And I think those outdoor things will come to the top of the line once we move into this thing more. One of the questions that we had, Julius, is looking at the strategic plan. Look on your website. Equity is just front and center across your mission statement there. Strong theme, very aggressive goals regarding equity, which is awesome. And just wondering specifically, how are you thinking about these responses, in terms of that lens, when you're thinking about, as you talked about, high school online and then younger kids in person, what's some of the discussion that you've been having and hearing regarding our students who are most disadvantaged in terms of, lacking those technological resources at home and support resources and so forth, and who we know achievement gaps and opportunities have been widening in the past few months? Kind of just, I have to imagine that's been part of conversation. What are you hearing? What's some of the thinking in that respect right now?
And first of all, thank you for lifting that up, because most times when we have conversations like this, it's all about the nuts and the bolts, right? And not necessarily how that all fits together for the individual student. And, you know, equity is a big deal in our district, and we do apply equity lens to everything that we're doing. Some fun facts, so to speak, that's associated with that is, you know, our district is 81% students of color. And from an update that we had from the health department just last night to our Board of Education, that, you know, our families of color in Durham are disproportionately affected by COVID-19, right? And so we know that that's down to our students once they return. And so you'll see there's a convergence between healthcare and education, and what we as educators have to do in order to flatten the curve and to make sure that more people aren't being affected. And so we have to partner with our local health department to make sure that communication is going out to our families, and by any means that we can get it out. We use Twitter heavily, and so if the health department has something that they're trying to get out to the general public, we're posting those things on our Twitter site. We're posting things on our website. Our feeding program, if they had anything like a leaflet or whatever they wanted to put with the food, we put it with that so that could get out to our families. Because that, you know, things don't stop at the campus edge. They're going to enter into our schools. And so, you know, but beyond the healthcare needs, you mentioned the internet access and devices, right? And so our district previously was just trying to get to 3 to 1 whenever the pandemic hit, and now we're making a push to get to 1 to 1, and our board approved.
Right.
We're going to use a great deal, actually, of our CARES Act funding to go towards purchasing devices.
Okay.
But, you know, a hammer's no good without a nail. And so that nail is going to be internet access and making sure that our students have access to that. And so we're partnering with people. One of the things that I call it the convergence of altruism and capitalism. And what I mean by that is when we had the shortage from our food service workers who took advantage of our state leave, we had to partner with nonprofits, with foundations, and with other county governmental entities, as well as private restaurants, in order to continue our feeding program. And that was good. That met the need of getting our students fed. Now it's a financial hit in that obviously we can. First, let me say thank you to those restaurants that participated. We had over 20 of them. They all met our reimbursable price point that we were getting for those meals. But still, you know, those of us who operate school nutrition know we depend heavily on those students' meals to pay the salaries and benefits and things like that of our school nutrition.
Sure.
And so, you know, we went without that for about 8 weeks, which is, you know, draining us financially. But our kids got meals, and the adults got meals as well, not through us, but through the foundation that was raising funds, the county that was putting funds with it. And then we collaborated to, while the students were there getting their meals, to also distribute it to the adults. It also gave us an opportunity to deliver meals directly to the homes of folks who could not leave their home to come retrieve it. So we're doing something very similar as it relates to technology, partnering with Duke University, with the city of Durham, with Durham Housing Authority, to make sure that we can get fiber and internet access to the places that we know suffer from high poverty.
Right.
You know, but back to the meals again, because this is the other challenge of having kids be at home, is that we would have to, again, use our imaginations really well to make sure that if you are home, if you participate in the virtual academies, or if you one of those students home, how do we get them food every day? Because beyond my district being 81% students of color, it's also 64% free and reduced lunch. And so of the 33,000 students that attend our school, about half of them do participate in our lunch and breakfast program. And so I got to be able to feed them some kind of how. So that's another.
Right, and several thousand of those will be just online at the high school.
That's right. Absolutely. And so it's almost like every time you think you got one nut crack, right? So I got the capacity nut crack because I'm going to send a few.
Right.
Some students are going to choose to be home through the virtual academy. But then it is, how do I get those fed that do choose to stay home or that we tell or ask to stay home?
I have to say it stands out to me, Julius, that in the response to the equity question, your answers focus on partnerships with Duke to around the feeding part and partnerships with the different food networks and partnerships with Duke. I'm sorry, with the technology side and other groups with the food and so forth, and it just intuitively makes sense. These are questions we're going to rhythmically ask of different folks and get different contexts from around the country, but you can't do it alone, I guess is the short answer.
No, you really can't. Our primary mission is education. But we also happen to be like the second largest infrastructure in the nation, right?
You're the biggest restaurant in town.
Absolutely. And that's what, differentiates us from everyone else. I run a restaurant in every single school. I run a transportation service in every single school district. We have custodial, like for us, all of our custodial is in-house. So I'm also running a cleaning firm. And it's the one place where you have to take care of, 40,000 people on a consistent basis every single day. There's not a lot of organizations that are tasked with that kind of responsibility. And so schools are very unique, and we depend heavily on getting that support from our families. But we also got to partner and get that support from the local governments that we're a part of. You think about November's coming up pretty soon, and a lot of us are going to be asked to provide, voting.
Yes, you will. Mm-hmm.
People to go to. And those are going to have all kind of people through them, and we're going to have to make sure that we can get them disinfected. And, voting's on Tuesday. I got to have that place turned over for Wednesday for kids to come back in the next day. And so those are just additional, challenges that we're faced with. And so we got to work together to make this thing work.
Yeah. And so I'm going to get to the chat here, and then I want to kind of reverse circle around some of these last questions that we're asking of everybody. But first of all, I want to call out to folks in the group and the questions of outdoor spaces. Sharon Danks is in the call, and Sharon's done a lot of great work in her organization on outdoor spaces and outdoor learning. She posted a link there, so do check that out. It's pretty amazing what can be done, where there's a will, there's a way kind of thing on outdoor learning. So check out Sharon's link there. And then one of the questions was, how do you plan to address recess? We mentioned we got to get, the kids out and moving because it's just not going to work to keep them bottled up. What's your thought around recess for your elementary age kids?
Yeah, so we definitely want to get them outdoors. We're going to rely heavily on the school administration to monitor and make sure that they're keeping social distancing while they're out there. And we're going to restrict or suspend use of playground equipment for right now. Okay. That we receive, basically says you need to disinfect those areas after use and things like that. And it's going to be hard enough just trying to touch areas inside the building, much less try to playground. So, man, you have to get those kids out. They have to let that energy go. I mean, you think about the types of furnishings that, and that's another thing that's going to have to change a little bit, but you think about the furnishings that you've seen over the past 10 years that enter into schools. It's all things that promote motion while they're learning, whether it's rockers, wheels, or whatever. And that's to help them, get that muscle memory with what they're learning, but also to burn off some of that energy. They have a lot more energy.
Fidget energy.
We do, yeah. And so, we got to get them out and to get that exercise for their own health and mental health. And that's another one too. I want to lift up. We don't talk enough about that.
Yeah.
About mental health.
Right.
What we're going to do for kids who aren't going to be able to come in and see the counselors and things like
Yep.
that, and making sure that we have those resources available for them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, that certainly seems like one of the things that what we're hoping to do is continue this conversation in the fall, because these questions aren't going away. And once we figure out capacity and busing and hygiene, and then it's going to be, okay, we got that squared away. Now, how do we deal with the mental health issues that we're dealing with? How do we deal with the other things? And so it's going to be an ongoing conversation for sure. So I guess, one of the challenges might be for those in the room and on the call who have some expertise in outdoor education and so forth, how are we going to do outdoor recess with social distancing and no play equipment, but still have it be recess, not just standing around outside? Anyway. So the last kind of set of questions here, we got about 15 minutes, Julius. And so we have these 5 buckets, and, what we're looking on in terms of, kind of key objectives that any plan for reopening needs to consider is teaching and learning practices for the fall, to ensure that regardless of circumstance, be it online or in person, every day or every other day or every other week, whatever, that learning is still happening, right? And, another bucket of consideration is, how are we going to clean our buildings? How are we going to clean, what are our protocols for cleaning our facilities, protocols for cleaning ourselves? And frankly, it's those two things that, seems like the data is going to come out. There's going to be a lot of churn in that data over the next few weeks and months as we get better data on that. But you mentioned school and bus capacity. I think it's a good, helpful dive into your thoughts around how to deal with that. And then lastly, this question of what might be some state policies that you think need to be amended or added to really make this successful. So maybe I'd like to start there and kind of then talk about the teaching and learning, perhaps, or just what are some things that you're seeing, like, man, if I'm going to open all traditional schools on August 17, here's what's keeping me up at night to do that. Is it enrollment count data that could lower your budget artificially just because you can't fit everybody on campus on the official head count day? Is it, some other set of seat time requirement that you're struggling to figure out how you're going to accommodate, and, and what that might mean for graduation rates or, or the ability for kids to move up grade level to grade level? I find that perhaps too much, but what are you thinking in those respects?
I mean, all of the above is
okay.
Right now, I think that, but for the most part, transportation is just one of those things that it involves time. Like, there's no way around it. On our most perfect day, we rarely get every student to school on time. There's going to be a
sure.
traffic accident, whatever. And then you layer that on. So you got to put yourself in the shoes of a second grade teacher. They have, 9 10 kids that are going to walk into that classroom. They're at a magnet school. They're getting transported from all over the county. 3 are going to come in at 8. Another 3 will come in at 8:45. And how do you teach those types of circumstances? And then the parent who has to pick that kid up from the bus stop at 7:30 at night because I can only put 12 on a bus. I mean, I am limited by the time. I started my career in construction and construction management. They always say a project is time, scope, and money. And I just cannot buy. There's not enough money for me to and resources to do those things. And I can't. And the only way I reduce that scope is if we relax what those restrictions and requirements are with the social distancing. But then that puts you in another conundrum with
Sure it does.
health officials are saying is
Yep.
best health practices, right? And so that's going to be really hard for us to navigate. I mean, this is a political one, but I'll say it anyway. You know, the state is running a state organization, and so they're going to look across the board at what's happening.
Sure.
State, and if cases are going low, they're going to say that we're going to be in this plan. But in my county, it may look very different than what the state looks like and what my neighboring counties look like, and just you know, having to deal with those phone calls about, you know, my cousin can go to school, and you know why I got, you know, and so that's school nutrition is another one that man, if we could you talk about some more public-private partnerships, if we could get it to where we could do like a Uber Eats where I can drop food off at these kids' homes that are doing virtual learning or out of school on the day, that would be, you know, that would be great. Because if kids aren't there and they're not eating, then that's taken away from what that reimbursement is, and that's going to impact the amount of staff. And you're not going to need any less staff because, you know, we got to think about if kids are staying and eating lunch and breakfast in their classroom, not only am I preparing the meals, but then I got to go and distribute those meals all across, which is a different time calculation.
While being 6 feet away from other people.
That's right. That's right. And so it's a total rethink about the way that we do school. You think about Little House on the Prairie, right? It was K-12 in one room, you know, and stuck with that. I mean, we stick as many kids in a room as possible. When we design new buildings, I make the gym humongous, I make the auditorium big, and I make the cafeterias big, so I can get as many of them in at one time as possible.
And now we're trying to do the exact opposite of everything we've been designed to do.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Right.
Absolutely. And so, and then you talked about personal hygiene and building hygiene. You know, every one of our schools do not have school nurses. And so there's going to have to be other staff that take on the responsibility of the requirement of doing screening for symptomatic visitors to the facility. And there's going to, you know, there's a time in doing that. You imagine, here's another thing, you know, with the way that schools have been trending because of school shootings and things like that.
Right.
Typically, make sure that all your other exterior doors are locked and people aren't going through there. They're getting funneled, you know, through the main entrance of the school. But, you know, it's going to be practical.
Can't do that now.
To get 900.
Can't do that now.
And that's right.
No.
And so now you're going to have all these other entry points that you're going to have to, you know, maybe do some capital investments for security reasons there. You're going to have staff to man.
People there watching them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then
taking temperatures.
Taking temperatures, having sanitizer. Yeah, absolutely. So all of these things are a tremendous, and again, and it's because, you know, we're trying to do these healthy way of living and dealing in this environment. But, you know, we really need people, and we really need the voices of school leaders at the table with people who are designing these guidelines and things, because most are really thinking about how do we get people back into the work environment and then trying to apply to the school environment, but it doesn't work like that.
No.
The mall where people are in and out, or, you know, go and things like that, but that does not work.
Schools are different.
That's right. So totally different.
Schools are their own animal.
Absolutely.
I think we maybe have time for one more question that just came in, and it's an intriguing one. How are you planning to store health information from screening? In other words, if a student has a fever, does that get recorded somewhere? How are parents alerted? How are you thinking about that relative to HIPAA concerns and so forth?
That is a great question. And that's the one that we wrestle with a lot. So think about this. We talked about, should we screen at the bus stop versus screen? Should I screen in the car rider line? Yeah. Don't even let them out the car if they have a fever.
Yeah.
But yeah, to the point. So right now, what our state guidelines and as well as our county and city orders say is you could ask the questions verbally you know, and have them to respond and then take the temperature and go. There's not necessarily a recordation of anything. Now, but what the state guideline says though is if you choose not to screen at the bus stop, for instance, and that you're going to do it at school, then an attestation must accompany the child to the school to answer those questions. Because think about it, would a kindergartner understand some of the questions that you may be posing to them? That's probably not a good thing. And so the idea, the thought behind screen is that you don't even let them enter the building. But if you just let them out and mama's driving on off to work, and what do if they have that fever of 101 or something like that, right? And so we know that there's going to be situations where we're going to have to accept them. And that's why it's so important that you have those isolation areas around every entry point where they can directly. And then you got to have a process for getting them. You know, one of the things that we heard from my elementary school principals in particular is, you know, a child pops up sick in the middle of the day, 11:30. You know, getting that parent there before they get off work is really tough to do. But, you know, we're going to have something very different as we go into the fall to get people who are exhibiting signs of being symptomatic. Another thing I would say, you know, with those buses, beyond just having to run more routes, we're also required to clean between those routes because you don't want to pick up a set of 12 and one of them, you know, is coughing or something all over the place and then come back and have to pick up another set. So there's a time elapse that has to go there.
You got to stop, clean the thing, and then.
That's right. And most of the chemicals, if you notice on the label, it says some of them have to sit for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or something.
Right, sure.
Yeah, it has to be taken in consideration whenever you're trying to plan out what your school day is going to look like.
So this is going to take us over a minute, so beg your pardon, folks, but you mentioned contact tracing at one point, contact tracing earlier. How are you looking to do that, again, balancing against these privacy concerns and so forth?
So in North Carolina, statutorily, there's a statute that actually relates to communicable disease notification to the local health department by child care facilities and public schools. So some are already in place how we notify the health department about.
You already have something in place for that.
That's right. It's just a matter of making sure that, you know, everybody's doing that. We and it's a direct communication between whoever the designee at the school is and who the health department is. Typically, that's a nurse, but like I said, not everybody is going to have a nurse there every single day, and so those are some things that we need to show up a little bit more. But there is a statute on the book. We have a policy with our school district that speaks directly to communication about communicable diseases.
Sure. Well, Julius, really appreciate it. This has been, really enjoyable, fascinating to me, and hopefully informative, helpful to others as well. Again, thank you very much for your time and willingness to take a deep dive here. Folks, just go ahead and please give Julius a big thank you. We are going to, I know I mentioned we had a bit of a snafu in sending out the registration for this. That won't happen again. We'll get this sent out to you early. If not tomorrow, then first thing Monday with a schedule for upcoming interviews. So we'll have the same kind of rhythm and format where we can noodle and take a deeper dive into what folks are experiencing. And hopefully it's helpful as we go through this summer while we kind of put together the structured guidance from our earlier work. So again, Dr. Vaughn, Julius, thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll continue the conversation here next week. So thank you, sir. Take care.